Hello and welcome to Grouchy Geeks episode 37. My name's Steve, my co-host is Scott.
Hello.
This episode we're going to kick off with a bit of news and reviews, and then for our main feature we're going to be talking about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, our predictions and our favourite films. But before all of that, we've got some news.
I do have to pick you up, though, because I thought we'd agreed that we were going to rename the show Grouchy Old Gardeners.
We could do that, yes. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so we moved into a new house a couple of years ago, and part of that we've got a greenhouse that I've not used. But it turns out that Steve is a keen gentleman gardener. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I'm a laissez-faire gardener.
Yeah. So 2 weeks ago, I went to Steve's house and he gave me a masterclass in gentleman gardening. So I'm attempting to grow some strawberries that he gave me and some cucumbers and courgettes and all sorts of things. So we'll see how that goes. But it sounds so old. But it's very good fun. It's a very relaxing thing to do. Not too much effort, no. But just enough effort to kind of find it relaxing at the moment. So we'll look forward to updating you all on the size of our crops as the summer continues.
If it's really difficult to do, I'm not interested, and I don't want to put that much time into it. But it's nice to get outside. It's something completely different. It's very relaxing, as you said. It's quite zen. And it gradually moves us to becoming slightly more self-sufficient and a bit like Tom from The Good Life. Yeah. Where, one day I hope to have my own crop of everything and pigs and sheep and goats and all sorts of things. Probably not in the back garden. I'd probably have to move house, but, maybe one day.
Yep, and all you need is a bow and arrow.
That's it. Well, I've got one, so I'm sorted. Right, what news in Geek World away from the garden?
So there's a couple of things that I probably wasn't going to... So a big Star Wars trailer came out this week that I ordinarily wouldn't mention because I'm really not that interested in Star Wars anymore. Yeah. So Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, which is episode 9, came out. Mm-hmm. I wasn't all that bothered about it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've seen the trailer,
you thought of it. So what do you think to it?
I think J.J. Abrams is going to say, of course we pretended that she wasn't related to anybody and blah, blah, blah. Actually, of course, she's really a Skywalker. He's just that thing of, he did that in order to attempt to make her not feel special and blah, blah, blah. So she's not a destiny. But she does, and she is. But he's also just kind of trying to fix from the previous director.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, he's got a lot of work to do in that regard.
Yeah, and nothing is wasted and everything means something, hence why he's bringing back everybody ever by the look of it.
So I wouldn't have even mentioned that trailer if it wasn't for something that to me looked way, way more interesting, which was 7 minutes of footage from the new TV show, and I was going to mention Disney Plus a little bit later as well. Yeah. The Mandalorian. I don't know if you saw this.
Yes, I watched this whilst it was still available.
Yeah. They squashed it pretty quickly, and it was very poor quality. And there was lots of American people like whooping in the background of the version that I saw. Yeah. But having said all that, it looks great. Carl Weathers looks fantastic in it. Mm-hmm. It looks dark. It looks dark and gritty. I kind of think we're at a point now where Star Wars would lend itself much better to a TV show than these movies that we're getting. And I really just thought it looked awesome from beginning to end.
Yeah, we're at that place now where waiting for a film every 2 to 3 years isn't really enough because the universe is so big. If they'd done the Marvel thing, I know that they're trying to do a bit of that now, but if they'd started with, it wasn't just a Skywalker story, there was a bunch of other things going on, then that probably would be fine. But at this stage, in 40 years, we've had less than a dozen films, and only 9 in the main story. That's Marvel have done 22 films in like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, they've got a lot to catch up. So doing a TV series makes absolute sense. And maybe they'll do other ones if this goes well. But keeping them short, I think that's key, like 8, 10, 13 episode things. Going to corners of the universe that we wouldn't normally see, different kinds of story as well. And it doesn't always have to be part of a giant saga. So I'm more interested in the TV series as well, like you, than the new films. Because they're saying they're going to rest the films for a bit whilst they think about what they're going to do. But I'd rather they go, and here are 3 other Star Wars TV series we're working on.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's a great universe, but we're just not getting stuff that really does it service at the moment. Whereas actually, I think kind of taking a step back and saying, right, we're just going to tell some really interesting stories without the enormous amount of baggage that we have about the main sequence Star Wars movies, and we'll just do something cool and interesting. To me, I think is an absolutely brilliant opportunity. Whereas the Rise of Skywalker stuff, if you're into it and you're really excited about it, then I'm really happy for you, but I just can't pluck up any enthusiasm at all for it anymore.
No, the last one was disappointing. There was some good bits, but on the whole, it was episode 1 all over again. A couple of great fights don't make a good film, no matter what people say about it. Episode 1 does have the best lightsaber fight ever in the whole thing, but the rest of the film's awful. So
yeah,
and it's the same as the previous one. So I don't know. I'm not sure I'll see it at the cinema. I'm definitely not going to race out to go and see it in a rush. Like people are going crazy for the Avengers tickets and that kind of jazz. But I don't know. I'm more interested, in seeing what they come up with next that's different.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to come on to this in a bit later, talk about Marvel, and also related to what we've just been saying about TV series. So with Disney Plus, Marvel have pulled all of the Marvel Netflix shows because they want to do all of their own. And they've just announced the 5th TV series. Have you heard about this?
Within the month, so I've heard that we're going to see Mark Ruffalo appearing on Disney Plus. I've heard that we're going to have a TV show starring Jeremy Renner as well on Disney Plus.
Yes, so the 5 are, we've got Loki with lovely Tom. We've got Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We've got WandaVision, which is Scarlet Witch and Vision. We've got Hulk, She-Hulk, which is Mark Ruffalo and someone who hasn't been cast yet as his cousin, Jennifer Walters. And then we've got Hawkeye with a potential person he's training up to be the new Hawkeye. Kate Bishop is what they're talking about. So that's five shows again.
And very, very interesting that they're getting, these people that have now become huge stars in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to actually appear in their, the streaming equivalent of TV shows now. So clearly they're going to be, high quality, high budget, but, they're pulling them back from being the main players on the movie screen.
Yeah, which we'll come on to as well, I guess, the main thing. But yeah, so that's 5 shows already. And with very big names. So, and obviously they've got the Star Wars TV show, and they're announcing a whole bunch of other things for the Disney Plus. So they're really trying to pull out all the stops to get people to buy this.
Yeah, and it's when it was first announced, I obviously complained about the fact that we had something that more or less stopped piracy, and we had a very small number of interesting streaming platforms, and now Disney are getting in on the game and CBS are getting in on the game, and we can't. Nobody's going to want to subscribe to all of them.
No.
But actually, Disney Plus are doing a really, really good job of making me want to subscribe to Disney Plus.
Yeah, I think if they do like the 3-month thing, which they always seem to do to get people hooked, I'm going to wait until a bunch of the shows are on there, get the 3 months, and then just binge them, which is what I did with Amazon for a while.
Yeah, and they now that they own Fox, they own so much stuff now that they can just have absolutely ton of stuff available to watch on day one. They own an astronomical amount of IP, and something that I mentioned in our little WhatsApp group was actually the interesting thing about streaming is that as soon as you subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus, that you get the entire back catalogue. So it's not quite like satellite TV where you just get whatever they're broadcasting at the time.
Yeah.
But actually what that means is, you could take advantage of the free 30 days and just, absolutely binge stuff. But at the same time, I could potentially see people, subscribing to Disney Plus for 3 months and getting caught up, and then cancelling that, and then going to Netflix for a few months, and then cancelling that, and then going to, I don't know, maybe CBS or something for a few months, and then just sort of cycling through them in order to get caught up. Because a lot of the time, there's not a huge amount of stuff that's constantly coming out on Netflix that I particularly want to see. So it'll be interesting to see where things go. But yeah, it feels like Disney Plus is. I've gone from being extremely cynical about Disney Plus, and although I'm still cynical about the business model, I think they're doing a really, really good job making me want to subscribe to it.
Yeah. Do you have any other news?
Yeah, a few bits. I've got a really off the wall piece of news. When I was talking about Rise of the Skywalker, this is something that I ordinarily wouldn't mention, but it was so bizarre and off the wall, and relates to somebody that we're both a big fan of, that I thought I had to mention it. So it's also Mark Hamill related. So I'm managing to link things. So back in the day when we were very much younger, one of the big horror films was Child's Play, which is about a kid's doll called Chucky.
Yes.
And it was kind of, I don't know whether it was straight to video or came out of the cinema, but it was sort of one of these horror films. It was probably quite low budget, but became really popular. They're now doing a reboot movie, which I ordinarily wouldn't be interested in at all. It makes me slightly more interested that Mark Hamill, who is an absolutely brilliant voice actor, is voicing Chucky. But the thing that appealed to me, that I found very amusing, so it's being the score is being composed by Bear McCreary, who we know from all sorts of brilliant things. So I'd think of him most in relation to Battlestar Galactica, and you probably do as well. But he's been involved in The Walking Dead, Outlander, which is another Ronald D. Moore show.
Yeah.
All sorts of huge things. So he's an absolutely amazing composer. But there's a brilliant video on YouTube where, as part of him composing Child's Play, he's literally purchased like hundreds of secondhand, like kids' toy instruments. The things that 5-year-old kids get that annoys the hell out of you. These little pianos and drums and things like that.
Right.
And it's just showing you basically a room of his where he must have hundreds of these kids' musical instruments. And that's what he's using to compose the score. So the score's going to be entirely done with children's toys.
What?
But I tell you, it actually sounds really good.
That's going to be so creepy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing more creepy than children singing and children's musical instruments, especially in his hands. So, generally not a huge interest in a reboot of an 80s horror film, but the fact that Bear McCreary's involved and is doing something completely off the wall actually makes me want to see it.
Yeah. Oh, I've never been a fan of horror films, and Chucky's always freaked me out anyway, but maybe I'll just listen to the music. Maybe that'll probably be bad enough. Yeah, it's probably still going to be disturbing. Little bit of news about something that we're super excited about. This is the new Picard show. Basically, they've announced a few more actors, and there's rumours about what parts they're going to be playing and all the rest, which I don't want to go into because there's a little bit of spoiler in case it turns out to be true. But they're sort of announcing more people and talking about it. But the best thing about the whole story is, and I skip right to the end, and it says the show is slated to debut sometimes towards the end of 2019.
Wow, that's a big surprise.
Yeah, so I was convinced it was going to be probably this time next year. But from the look of it, they're going to actually start filming they'd have to start filming relatively soon to then maybe it would come out, I don't know, October. So that's 4 or 5 months, and they'll be filming probably whilst it's still airing they'll be wrapping it up. And depending how fast they put it, they'll probably do a few, break for Christmas, and then do the rest in the New Year's, my guess. But it means we still get some new Picard this year.
Yeah, amazing. So that possibly ties into the theory that I've sort of had, which is this is going to be, it's not going to be this massive epic special effects, laden, huge TV show, but it's actually going to be something quite self-contained and personal. Yeah, which is maybe how they they bring it to the screen quite quickly, because the only pictures we've had is sort of Patrick Stewart sitting in the room with the writers discussing things and things like that. But that would be Wow, that's way closer than I was expecting. I was thinking maybe end of 2020. So that's about a year ahead of sort of the schedule that I had in my head. I haven't seen any announcement about who the actors are going to be, but I was really pleased to read today that Jonathan Frakes is going to be directing a few of the episodes.
Of course, he had to be. He
absolutely had to be. Yeah.
There's all this thing about IP and who owns what and all the rest of it, but I really hope they get some of the other TNG cast in at some point. They've got to. They've got to find a way to navigate around the red tape and stuff to serve the story the best way possible. They're his friends, and yes, they're saying that the character's moved on for 20 years and all the rest of it, but those kind of things just don't go away. So they're going to have to touch on them at some point. Yeah,
I agree, and it would. What I don't think we want is them all reunited again for every episode, right?
No.
We don't want the Star Trek movies where they're just talking about how old they're getting. What we want is a Picard show, which I absolutely think it's going to be, but then with just his story intersecting with the old crowd, and I think I'd be quite happy with that.
Yeah, like he needs some help with an engineering thing. He goes to the place where Geordie's now the head of engineering for all of Starfleet or whatever, developing the new Warp 12 engine or something.
Yeah,
or he needs someone's help with positronic stuff, and he goes and finds B4. Who's now taking the memories on of Data, and he's now the new Datas or something. And he should look exactly the same. So a lot of slaps gonna have to go on little Brent Spiner's face.
Yeah.
But and colour his hair again and so on. But yeah, I'm really excited about the fact that we're hopefully going to get to see it this year. That's the best news I've had in ages.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
What else have you got?
So I had one more piece of news, I think, which was something I didn't even realise was coming out until today. And then I saw the trailer, and the trailer looked absolutely fantastic, which is, and I don't know if you've ever read the original comic, but coming to Amazon Prime Video is a live-action version of Garth Ennis's The Boys.
Yes, I read this.
I had no idea. Have you known about this for a long time?
Yes.
Because it came as a complete surprise to me that they were doing this.
So Carl Urban has always said that he'd want to get involved in Dread if they're doing some kind of TV series. And we thought, great. Then they announced he was getting involved with the Amazon series, The Boys. And I thought, shit, what does that mean? But then they've said the Dread series isn't just going to be about him. It would be about him and other judges. So I thought, there's a possibility he's still cameo in it. But given that they haven't moved on or announced anything yet, I don't know what's going to happen if that actually progresses, but there's still a good chance that he could hopefully be in it. And now that The Boys, we've had the first trailer out, it suggests they're a lot further along. Amazon don't wait around. So yes, we've known who that's going to be. We know that Simon Pegg is in it, but not as the character that he's in the comics. Do you know about this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's playing his character's father in the TV series compared to the version that was done. Looks exactly like him in the comics.
Yeah, and there's really interesting people involved in it. So one of the directors is Dan Trachtenberg, who there used to be a podcast on, must be going back 10 years now, called The Totally Rad Show, that he co-presented before he was ever a big movie director. Probably the movie that he's most well known for now is 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was fantastic. And then writers, so Garth Ennis is on board, as you'd hope. Eric Kripke, who I'm sure you're a big fan of,
Supernatural
is on board.
Creator.
Yeah. Seth Rogen and a whole bunch of other interesting names. And I thought the trailer was brilliant.
So we should probably say what The Boys is for those who don't know. So Garth Ennis has always said for a long time he doesn't like superheroes. He's never really written them as such. He's written kind of anti-heroes and villains and so on. The Boys was his answer to what do you do where you've got superheroes in the world but you don't like them, and some of them are getting away with things because nobody can stop them. And he's created this group of people called The Boys, who are not superheroes. They don't have powers as such, but they're there to keep superheroes in check. They're like a Black Ops group made up of interesting characters with very strange backgrounds, and they're all completely different people. And yeah, Carl Urban is playing the leader of the group, Butcher, and It's if you've seen Preacher, written by the same executive producers, you've got a little bit of an idea of how splatterpunky it's going to be, but with superheroes.
Yeah, and like I said, the trailer was great. It's an interesting idea where you've got you're in a world with superheroes, but superheroes aren't the heroes of the story. They've tried to do things like that in the past. Yeah. There was that awful DC thing that only lasted a few episodes. I can't even remember what it was called now.
Like a cleaning crew thing.
Yeah, that's right. But this actually looks really, really promising, and is based on a comic that I thought would never make it onto the screen.
No. But I just like the fact that you've got this superpowered ultimate team that everyone thinks is amazing, comprised of analogues of the Justice League, and the boys and Butcher basically says they're all dodgy. I'm going to take them all down. And everyone's like, what do you want about? Oh, they're the best in the world. They're great. There's the Superman character, the Batman. They're brilliant. And he's like, no, they're not. So at some point, it's all going to kick off. But yeah, he goes after them and a whole bunch of other people that need taking down and educating. And he's the one to do it with his group. So big names as well in this. Very big names behind the camera and in front of it. So
yeah, really exciting stuff.
I only had one bit of kind of comic book news. We haven't really done a sort of comic book series in a while. DC brought in Brian Bendis, who's been working on the Superman books, and a lot of people have always been asking if there's ever going to be any kind of other spin-off books from Superman in some capacity. And they've now finally announced that they're doing 2 limited spin-off series, one focusing on Lois Lane and the other on Jimmy Olsen. And it hasn't been a mini-series from either of those characters in a long time. They used to be, going back, 50, 60 years. But the good news is Greg Rucka is going to be writing the Lois Lane mini-series.
Cool.
Which is perfect because he's probably one of the best people to write it. Him and Brian Bendis have had long conversations about the character, and they both absolutely love her. And I can just see some of the artwork they've previewed, and it looks really, really good. So I'm definitely going to be getting that just on the basis of the character and the people who are going to be working on the book. So I think it's going to come out later this year. So that'll be something I might trade weight and then just pick it up.
Yeah, awesome.
Right. Shall we go on to the main feature?
Yep. Okay, welcome back. So with the imminent release, I think in about 8 days' time, of Avengers Endgame coming up, we thought we'd revisit once more the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So we're going to talk about, as Steve said in the news section, that we've had, did you say 22 films to get us to this point?
I think so.
So we're gonna talk about a very difficult to get selection of our top 3 films out of 22, almost consistently great films, and then talk a little bit about maybe what our predictions are for the next 10 years, given that we're now in 10 years into Marvel and Disney's world domination plans. So do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, shall we do do our top 3 and talk about them to begin with? So this was really difficult, more difficult than I expected, actually, because some of them are very, very different films. And even though they're all within this superhero genre, you could say that they just focus on very different aspects. So I have actually ranked them 3, 2, and 1 as well.
Okay.
Which I didn't think I'd managed to do. Have you done that?
Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
Okay. So my number 3 is actually, I class it as a comedy action film, kind of like a buddy film in a way. And it's a more recent one. I didn't expect it to be on the list, but it's Thor Ragnarok.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. So why is that so far up there for you? So
the first Thor film was really, really good, and it was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and it did have this kind of great Shakespearean feel to it, and having Anthony Hopkins in it and bringing all of that stuff was so good. It brought so much weight to the role and made you believe in all of it. And it's quite a tragic story from Loki's side, so very kind of Shakespearean. The second film was okay. It was more of a smashy, fighty film, and there's less substance to it. And there's some good moments in it. But by the time you get to this third film, he's gone through the redemption thing of making himself worthy. He's fought for his own people. And now this film is all about that he loses absolutely everything. Everything is taken away from him, and we thought it couldn't get any worse. So there's so many great moments. Again, I like some of the action scenes, and those were fantastic. I like the quieter moments the best. There are some brilliant scenes between Chris Hemsworth and Tom and Anthony Hopkins, and it's this great family drama thing where he's talking about the past and dreams and the future and what's coming and all this kind of stuff. And then we get the stuff with his sister and all that things that kicks off. It's so good. And I know you get some of the other Avengers coming in and doing their parts, and Jeff Goldblum and the comedy side, but it's all of the more serious stuff. I don't think I would have picked this if we hadn't had the first two films. If this is just coming by itself, I would have gone, yeah, it was okay, and I probably would have picked something different. But it worked as the perfect kind of end cap for his kind of trilogy, and that's why I think it was a lot more powerful, despite it being extremely funny, directed by obviously Taika Waititi.
So it's interesting. So I have some problems with this, and the problems that I have with it are actually related to what my number 3 choice and my number 2 choice is.
Oh.
So I really, as a standalone movie, I really liked Thor Ragnarok. I thought it was fun. I thought it was entertaining. I completely agree with you that I like the quiet moments and the action moments and the comedy moments blended together really well. One of the things that I found slightly disappointing was something that you recommended to me when I had Marvel Unlimited. I think it was you that recommended it to me, was Planet Hulk.
Yes.
And I thought Planet Hulk was such an absolutely brilliant comic arc that it was slightly disappointing that was subsumed into a film that wasn't primarily about Hulk.
True.
Like, it felt to me that it could be its own independent thing. The thing that I find, and I'll mention what my number 3 choice of film is, because it's related to the problem that I have a little bit with Thor Ragnarok, even though I really like it. Like I say, my number 3 pick was Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think one of the things that I liked about Guardians of the Galaxy was what a surprise it was. Like, we'd had all of these films up until this point that were set on Earth and were with superheroes that we were familiar with, and I wasn't particularly familiar with Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was something that felt really fresh and really different, and that I loved the comedy of it. And it was just like, wow, they're telling a story that's really unique and interesting that fits into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I remember really vividly going to the cinema to watch it and being just completely surprised and blown away by it. The issue that I have a little bit with Thor Ragnarok is that Guardians of the Galaxy set such a brilliant tone within the Marvel Cinematic Universe that it feels like a lot of the films are converging to that same tone.
Some of them are trying to, yeah.
And Thor Ragnarok really felt like that to me, particularly I agree that the third movie worked better because of the 2 movies that came before it, but given the tone of the 2 movies that came before it, and particularly because Thor Ragnarok starts relatively tragically with what happens to Anthony Hopkins, unless I'm getting that mixed up with Infinity War. I'm confused.
No, it is in Ragnarok.
Okay, right. But the fact that it very quickly turns into a movie that to me feels very like Guardians of the Galaxy is a little bit of a missed opportunity for being able to tell things with very different tones within this universe. And that's going to relate to the second film that I'm going to mention as well. So I love it, but to me it was a bad sign, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It did feel like they were trying to do that and lean into the comedy too much, thinking that it would always work. But the films after that, I think, have shown that they realise if you're going to make a unique film with a different character, just stick to that and stick to what works. So I know that Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp do have a more comedic tone to them, but I think 1, that's the character, and 2, the lead. You can't have Paul Rudd always being serious.
No.
From what we've seen, it's not a spoiler from the trailers, there's obviously going to be some tragedy in his story going forward because half the world's disappeared. So he's going to have some people gone that he loves and like everybody else does. And so that's going to give it a great kind of weight. But if Paul Rudd just came on screen always being serious, yes, he's an actor and yes, he can play serious, but he's primarily known for comedy and he's very, very good at it.
But also the great thing about Ant-Man as well is it came in in a time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where things were getting more and more and more epic. Like Iron Man is a relatively small and self-contained story, and the first Captain America movie is as well. But when Ant-Man came out, things were like starting to become, massive, universe-changing arcs.
Yes.
We were beginning to get. And then Ant-Man came out, and it was like a comedy heist movie.
Yeah.
And there was some really cool, interesting things that happened in it as well. So that it was almost like a breath of fresh air when Ant-Man came out to me, I think. Yeah. And I'm certainly not complaining about the comedy in these movies because I think generally they nail it really, really well. It was just more of actually this sort of convergence to things having things beginning to have a very similar tone.
Yeah. I think they've moved away from that now with the likes of Black Panther and Captain Marvel and obviously the new Avengers films. And but okay, so that was my number 3 and your number 3. Do you want to say what your number 2 is, given that it's related?
Yeah, so I suspect this one is going to be on your list somewhere as well, possibly the number 2 position. But my number 2 film, and when I say it's related, I'll explain what I mean, because it's a very different film, is Winter Soldier.
Okay, so that's on my list.
Okay.
So how do you say it's related then? Go on.
So I don't mean it's related in terms of the films themselves.
Right.
I say it's kind of related to my opinion of Thor Ragnarok and this troubling feeling that everything is converging into something that feels like Guardians of the Galaxy. Because I absolutely loved and continue to love Winter Soldier. It's one of the standout films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to me. And one of the things I loved about it is not only is it an absolutely brilliant standalone film, it was the first time I watched something and thought, actually, they can tell this cinematic universe is set up in such a way that they can cover multiple genres within the same cinematic universe.
Yeah.
And what we've got, what the brilliant thing that we have in Winter Soldier is this absolutely, almost classically constructed Cold War epic involving, espionage and subterfuge and, nasty things going on behind the scenes. And in the middle of it is, Captain America, this absolutely, completely upstanding citizen. And it was the idea that we're telling, or we're getting to watch stories within a universe where the tone can be completely different from one movie to the next, but still everything fits in and makes sense. And I think Winter Soldier sold me on that possibility more than anything, because in my opinion, the tone of Winter Soldier is so different from any other of the Marvel movies. And the reason I said it was related is Winter Soldier showed you the potential of what they could do within the Marvel universe, whereas Thor Ragnarok showed that they were kind of converging to a single tone, which I don't think they needed to do.
Yeah. I think that, as you say, it's on my top 3. It reminds me in a way of what you said about Dark Knight Returns, the second Dark Knight Returns, isn't it? Yeah. That is an amazing crime film that in some ways just happens to have Batman in it. It's the same with this. This is, as you said, a Cold War espionage drama that's full of action and all the rest of it. It's really, really cool and all sorts of stuff that just happens to have Captain America in it. I read the comic 20-odd years ago when Ed Brubaker first created the Winter Soldier, brought back Bucky Barnes and all that stuff and added to it and all the mythos. So I've been waiting for something like this for years. And then, adaptations are never as good. There's always that thing of, okay, they're going to lose something in translation and all that kind of stuff. And then they cast Sebastian Stan and I saw him in the outfit and I thought, well, maybe. And then I watched this film and thought, that was absolutely incredible. It is one of these films that, of all the Marvel films, I have watched The Winter Soldier the most. It's not a short film. It's probably a couple of hours and change, but it's such a good self-contained film, as you say, that I can just sit down and watch it because it's about enemies and hidden things and all sorts of who you can trust and fitting in with society. Is not just Captain America, but also security and how much freedom are you willing to give up in the name of security and safety, which is all echoes with today's society in lots of places. So it's still relevant now. And I agree. I think in some ways, the more that they've gone towards the really big films with the Avengers, which I'm not saying I don't enjoy, I think they've lost something of the Marvel universe that shows you the possibilities of what they can do. So maybe, I'll tell you what my gut tells me, that the television series are going to do that, but not the films. I think the films are going to stay within that epic blockbuster space because they can command $1 billion, $2 billion at the box office. And I think they're more interested in doing that than going, let's try something else. I mean, we know we're going to get an end cap to Guardians now with the original director coming back and all the rest of it. But my fear is going forward, that's what we're going to see, not this diversification into new places.
I mean, the next thing that we're going to talk about is kind of where we see things going in the next few years. So that will be an interesting discussion to happen then. But I think I mean, I love, just as a movie in itself, I love The Winter Soldier. And one of the things that I really like is when you go back and watch it, even though it fits in with the universe perfectly well, the Marvel films tend to be extremely bright and colourful. And actually, even the color grading of the movie sort of reflects the tone of the film.
Yeah,
and it just works. It just works perfectly. And even it's such a simple scene, but I just love the opening with Captain America doing laps on the left,
on your left, on your left. Don't say it. I just love it. Here's a little bit of trivia then that you probably don't know. So the guy who created the Winter Soldier, Ed Brubaker, a writer at Marvel Comics, he's actually in the film.
Right? No, I didn't know this.
So in one of the scenes, they asked him if they wanted to be on it, like they did with JMS when he was in the first Thor film. They said, "Did he want to be in it?" And he was. He was in it in the truck when they're trying to pull Thor's hammer out the crater. So that's JMS and Stan Lee and stuff. So when they did this, they asked him if he wanted to be in it. He said yes. When they go to the bank vault and they're going to reprogram the Winter Soldier, and Robert Redford kind of comes in and says, "How is he?" And he goes, "Oh, he's having problems, this, that, and the other." There are a bunch of kind of scientists and geeks in white coats. One of them is Ed Brubaker.
Nice.
And he said, I've listened to his story. Like he said, they asked him, and he went along and he stood there and he was, I think he's got like one line or something, but he got distracted watching Robert Redford act up close that he fluffed one of the takes. And it's just like, dude, oh, sorry. It's just like, how often do you actually get to see Robert Redford act in front of you?
Yeah, crazy.
So that would freak anybody out. But yeah. So actually, The Winter Soldier was my number one.
Okay, interesting.
So I'll tell you what my number two was then.
Okay.
It's the first Avengers film.
Interesting, cool.
So the reason for this is that I don't even know how many years it was in. It was, 5 or 6 or 7 years in when we finally got this convergence of all of these characters that we've been seeing for years and years and years. We've had overlaps, we've had post-credit things, we've had hints. They've shown us like the Shield, or they've shown us, they've talked about different bits and pieces, and then finally, it all comes together in one place. It's written and directed by one of my favourite people, with Joss Whedon doing it. The script is brilliant. It's punchy. The jokes are there. All of the tone of all of the different characters works really well. And all of the actors on screen together were absolutely brilliant. And there's too many moments to go through in that film to say what I love about it. But whether it's the bit where they're all just talking, or right at the end with, Cap telling people what to do and they just fall in line because he's Captain America. It's just brilliant. And just every time I watch it, I've just got a massive smile on my face. It if the Marvel Universe had ended with that, I would have been happy, because it was just like this perfect bringing together of things that we've been waiting for years in the film universe, in decades, if you're a comic book fan.
Yeah, and just what an incredible achievement, and it's closely related to my number one choice, but it's just the way that everything managed to culminate in that movie, right? You know, we saw these people in individual films, and just the way that they managed to build it up to that. Whereas, you know, one of the problems with, you know, not wanting to focus on this too much, but one of the problems I had with, you know, Justice League and what DC were trying to do was that they because they felt like they were on catch up, they just tried to get there too quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, it felt like if the progression of the Marvel movies felt like we got there in a really, really natural way, and the way that they introduced the characters and the crossovers that they had was absolutely brilliant. And it was just that crowning achievement where you watched it and you were like, they managed to pull it off, and they pulled it off brilliantly.
I'm trying to think. I think it was the first one that made $1 billion. I think it's the first one that broke the box office of the Marvel films to do it.
And rightly so. I mean, just what an incredible achievement it was.
Yeah. So there you go.
To reach that point,
1.5 billion at the worldwide box office. On a budget of 220 million. So
yeah, it's crazy, right?
That's absolutely insane. There's no surprise they said, "Brilliant, do us another one, Joss." So he did.
Yeah. So my number one pick. Now we know what. Yep. Now we know every film on our top three, apart from my number one, which is number one for me for exactly the same reasons why you picked Avengers, I think. Okay. Which was Infinity War, because that to me just felt very similar in the sense of this feeling of they pulled it off. It was we had 21 films that led us to, or 20 films that led us up to that point, and they managed to pull who would have thought that they could have had not just that caliber of, A-list actors, all together in that, but pull together all of those different threads, from all of these different films, and give them all something good to do and interesting, and make it engaging and dramatic. And it was just that satisfying feeling of they did it. They managed to do it, and it was epic and satisfying and fantastic. And I just can't imagine the amount of thought that must have gone into that 10-year journey to get them there.
So I'll say this, and it's probably going to be not really controversial, but a surprise. It is. So I did really, really enjoy Infinity War. It was absolutely brilliant, no doubt about it. On the other hand, with reflection, having looked back on it, because there are so many characters, because there's so much to pack in, I think I enjoyed it less, because you're constantly fighting against the clock to give everybody a moment. Everybody has to have time on screen. They have to do something. So we know that certain characters didn't appear because they physically couldn't get them in without making the film 5 hours. So Ant-Man and Hawkeye and a bunch of others didn't appear, or maybe they got a brief thing in the post-credits, like Kobe Smulders or whatever, and Nick Fury and things. But they couldn't do it because they're just too many people. So when we had Avengers, the first one, and then Ultron, which was on my kind of honourable mentions, those felt comfortable. You were working with, I think, a dozen big people, and even then, it was starting to get a little bit crowded. Some of the best moments in Ultron were the 12 of them or the 10 of them sat around, all trying to pick up Thor's hammer. And it's just, because it's a bunch of people, friends, hanging out in a moment between all of these things. And then when you get to Infinity War, you don't stop, really. You can't. No. You don't have the quiet, loud, quiet. It's just everything's going on straight away. Peter's here, Tony's doing this, Cap's doing this, and it's just kind of relentless. And it is brilliant, but I think I'm going to enjoy the slightly quieter films before they lead up to another big one. So, yeah, that's why it wasn't my top 3.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. And I think that actually, I'm almost going to contradict myself now, but I think if you just take it by itself as a standalone film,
yeah,
then I don't think it would make my top 3. But for me, it's just the crowning achievement of the journey that managed to get us to this point that they could pull something like that off.
Yeah,
and it, I even though I accept everything that you said, they pulled it off brilliantly, and I'm sure you would agree with that. Even despite all of the reservations that you've just mentioned, like I say, I agree with. But it's just this crowning achievement of how you pull together all of these threads in a way that we've never ever seen before. And we might get on to this when we talk about the future of the movies, but I'm not convinced it's something that we're ever likely to see again in the near future as well. The fact that they did that and did it so successfully.
No, I think it'll be another 10 years or more before they build up to that, and it could be even longer, to be honest. But I was going to say, my other honourable mention that I had on the list was Captain America Civil War. I know some people referred to it as Avengers 2.5 because it did have a lot of the other people in. And yeah, I really enjoyed those fight scenes. But for me, it was the kind of the end cap of Captain America, Bucky, and their story, their friendship, and Tony Stark as well. I guess it's his story too, of what brought them all the way from the very beginning, with him coming out the cave and his parents and his family, and then Steve and Bucky and all of that, and just such a great film as well. But it was starting to get a little bit crowded again at times, I think. But yeah, really, really good film.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I really like it, and to me, I never really think of it as Captain America: Civil War, even though I know it is.
Right. Shall we move on to where we think it's going to go in the future?
Yeah, okay. So this is, we said instead of sticking with the past, we'd attempt to make probably, I'm going to guess, very poor predictions about what's going to happen in the future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because, if we knew what was going to happen and what was going to work, we would probably have much larger houses than we currently do.
We'd be millionaires, Rodney, this time next year. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so where do you think it's going to go? What's your first prediction?
Okay, so my first prediction, which I think is going to be a pretty safe one, which is we're going to have, at least to some extent, a reset on the epicness of the recent films that we've been having.
Agreed.
We got to the end of Infinity War where, something absolutely devastating happened, and we had, literally universe-changing implications as to what they were doing. And we've visited the end of that arc, and they can't continue to do that. So I think we're going to see, as we see some of the main characters that we've followed be relegated to doing cameos, and I think a whole bunch of new heroes being brought forward, we're going to see things starting small again and a lot more personal, and a slow build up to kind of where we are now, because they can't, like you were talking about in Thor Ragnarok, and in some of the other movies where you have this satisfying balance between, the huge explosive epicness and things being much more quiet. We kind of need that across all of the films as well. And we got the big, noisy, loud, epic explosion that was Infinity War, which I'm guessing will continue to some extent with Endgame as well. But we just need to, they need to give the audience a breather, and I'm sure they will do that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. But what I think they're going to start doing, given that they planned this roughly and they hoped that they'd hit Infinity War and Avengers 10 years ago. I don't know how much they knew, but they had ideas of where they're going to go. I think they're going to do the same thing again. I think they know what the next big bad will be in X years. How that might flex It might be 8 years, it might be 7, it might be 12, but I think there's some flex in there. But I think they're going to start planting the seeds from the first film of the new wave.
Absolutely. I mean, we had Thanos appearing in the end credit sequence in the very first Iron Man film, didn't we? So I don't know
if it was Iron Man. It was one of them. It was very early on.
I'm almost as certain that it was the first Iron Man film.
Wasn't it the first Avengers film?
So yeah, so it was Nick Fury that was the big reveal, wasn't it, at the end of
Iron Man.
Sorry, so we were both wrong actually, but I was more wrong than you, which is the most important thing. So the first hint that we had about Thanos was in the first Thor film, because we got to see the first Infinity Stone. I'm not quite sure where Thanos appears, but yeah, okay. So I was wrong on that, but we saw him, relatively early on in that sequence of films.
Yeah. I think they'll start planting clues. I think they'll hint at something and they'll just drop the seeds in. How quickly they develop will depend on how well the films are going, but it'll build and build and build. This isn't really. It's pretty obvious. They're going to kill off a bunch of the Avengers, and a bunch of them we already know are going to spin off into their new series. Yeah. And I think the actors will either take a complete step back from the films, or they may have very small cameo parts in the new wave. But apart from that, they'll be moving on to other projects outside of the Marvel TV, and some of the actors will just go off and do their own thing in other spaces, so that they can clear the decks and they can start to trickle in new characters, especially now that they own Fox.
Yes. So there's, first of all, I 100% agree with what I think what will happen is we'll start to see the characters that we've followed most closely in the last 10 years will start to just be in there as cameos, like we've already seen with Tony Stark in the Spider-Man films, for example. He's kind of there as in the background as a mentor, but he's not a major character. And I think we'll see a new set of characters, and some of those, given that they now own a very large chunk of Fox, we'll start to see people like the X-Men get included and Fantastic Four getting included, and maybe even Deadpool getting included. That they'll bring these characters, and I'm not saying this is true of Deadpool, but X-Men and Fantastic Four have both been, really, really, beloved characters in the comics that never quite managed to reach their full potential in movies. No, in my opinion, and actually, bringing them back into the family and trying to do it right, I think is really exciting.
I think the X-Men will probably come first because there's a lot more of them. They can lean towards certain characters. I think the best Wolverine film we've ever had, we talked about before, was Old Man Logan. I think they're going to be cautious with recasting and bringing in Wolverine too soon. I think they might trickle in the odd mutant here and there that'll cause problems. I mean, it could even be that they go towards something. They do something radical as not a big bad, but a big fix, and you have like, what's it called? Age of M, I think it was called, or of M in the comics.
So the advantage that they have
House
with
of M, sorry.
So something that they did, something that they did with the last 10 years is they didn't pick the obvious superheroes right off the bat. Right? Yeah. We've all heard about these characters now, but they didn't pick the most famous, prominent ones that everybody had heard of. And the advantage with the X-Men is that there's a ton of them.
Oh, yeah.
So, just because it's the X-Men, it doesn't mean that we're going to be getting initially Wolverine and Jean Grey and all of the characters that we really associate with the X-Men. There's loads and loads of interesting X-Men that they could pull from to feature the X-Men without the baggage that they've had in the past. And one of the things that they do, one of the advantages that they've had over DC is DC are completely obsessed with Batman and Superman, and Marvel haven't been afraid of actually pulling out superheroes that mainstream audiences haven't heard of and taking advantage of that fact. And they can't do that with the Fantastic Four because everybody's heard of who the Fantastic Four are, but with the X-Men, we don't need Professor X to feature the X-Men because there's a bazillion of them out there.
Yeah. So I think you're going to get a trickling in of that. You're going to have, I don't know, maybe, so there's a thing in the comics called the Illuminati, and it's essentially like a brain trust of all of the smartest people that get behind the scenes and try and plan things. You might get that at some point, and that's how they could kind of have a cameo of certain characters that we've seen in the past cropping up and then stepping back into the shadows again. So maybe that's the way you'd get someone like a Professor X in, or Doctor Strange or something. But my gut tells me that the kind of new de facto leader in the Avengers going forward will either be Strange or, more likely, Black Panther, T'Challa.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
because he's been a leader of the X-Men, of Avengers before, and he's a very popular character, and of course now he's a king. But he's established. That's the other thing. We've seen him in, I think, 3 films now at this point. So he's not someone that is brand new, but he's quite a good bridge, I think, between the old and the new, because they all respect him.
Yeah, I think it's much more likely to be Black Panther. I mean, I really, really like the Doctor Strange movie, and I really liked what they did with Doctor Strange. Yeah. But Doctor Strange, to me, isn't a particularly likable character. Like, I don't think he's played as being somebody that you particularly have a strong affinity with. No. Whereas Black Panther is a really great character, and people do have a really strong affinity with. So I think he's much more likely to be Black Panther, because I think Doctor Strange just isn't. I just don't think he has the same sort of level of popular appeal.
He's not a people person, like you saw the scenes that he had with Tony Stark. They're both incredibly arrogant, and it just doesn't work.
And that's not a criticism of the character at all, because that is what the character is.
Yeah,
but he's not. He doesn't have the charisma of T'Challa, and that movie absolutely exploded and did enormously well. So yeah, I think that's actually that's a good show, I think.
Black Panther's now done 1.3 billion at the worldwide box office. Yeah.
Is that the most successful one?
No, I think it's one of the Avengers ones that's basically broken 2 billion.
It's just nuts.
Something like that. But I think also it's not even the biggest one, like film of all time. So Avengers Infinity War is currently at $2.04 billion worldwide. My gut tells me Endgame will break that. I don't think it'll put it in the top 3 of all time.
No.
It's something like, I think Titanic's still up there,
Yeah, probably. I guess if you adjust for inflation, some of these things are still going to be huge.
It's crazy, though. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you have any particular X-Men or that you'd want to see come in, or are you just happy to be introduced to new faces?
I'm happy to be introduced to new faces. Like I say, I don't think X-Men and Fantastic Four has just been something that they just have never quite managed to work, and it would be interesting to see them think. Who would have thought that Guardians of the Galaxy would have been so? But who would have thought that actually so many of these films would have been as brilliant as they turned out to be? So yeah, I would like to see them kind of avoid Professor X and Cyclops and Wolverine and all the main ones that we've seen before, and actually just plunge the depths of who are these really interesting X-Men that we haven't seen very much of, and most people won't have heard of, and let's see what interesting things we can do with them. And like I say, that makes Fantastic Four that much more difficult, because we have seen Fantastic Four and done badly so many times.
Oh yeah. But interestingly, Chris Evans was the Human Torch.
You're right. Yeah,
which is quite weird, but there you go. But see, I don't think they've done Cyclops very well yet.
No, I agree.
In terms of the films, because he was a bit of a whiner and a bit of a soft touch, and he was constantly squabbling with Jean and Logan in the films, and whereas in the comics, he's actually, despite more recent problems and stuff, he's a really good leader, and he's inspiring, and he's that kind of person that people will fall in behind, because he's a mix of like T'Challa and Cap in that kind of presence that he has. So getting a different actor in, a slightly older actor than James Marsden, and having someone come in as a older Cyclops, I think could work really, really well. But I don't know. I don't know how they're going to start trickling in the mutants or when they're going to start doing it. But the next few films I think we've got are Black Panther 2, Doctor Strange 2. Later this year, we've got Spider-Man Far From Home, I think it is.
Yeah.
So that's at least one film this year. Next year's ones, my gut tells me later in the year they'll announce them a couple of months after the end of Endgame.
Yeah.
The next 4 or 5. They'll announce the next wave, basically. Oh, and Guardians 3, of course.
Yeah.
So that's at least 3 we know of for sure, which could be the next 2 years, to be honest.
Yeah, probably will be. So I'm going to go with. I probably have one more. Well, I couldn't have 2 more predictions, but I'm going to go with my. Since we're probably running out of time, I'm going to go with my most controversial one, which is my prediction is that we might, if we're lucky, get another 10 years out of these movies. But after that, we're going to be done, and I don't think they'll ever recreate what they've managed to do with Infinity War and Endgame.
Right? Yeah, that's very possible. Very possible.
I just think so. Once they've done another 10 years and built up to whatever the new Infinity War is going to be, we'll have been living with these movies absolutely dominating the cinema for 20 years, which is a really long time. It will have been a significant percentage of my entire lifetime that we will have been obsessed with these movies and talking about them. And when you see these absolutely ludicrous things like there are tickets for Endgame being sold for $5,000 each online.
Yeah,
we've managed to kind of reach this absolute frenzy of just this peak obsessiveness of something that I think when going back to what my first point, which is we'll have a reset on how epic all of these stories are, and we have to do that. But I don't think people will have quite the same energy of ramping things back up to the same level again. And I sort of go back and think, well, when I was a kid, Westerns were all the rage.
Yep.
There's so many Westerns. And we see the occasional one, but it's just not really a thing anymore. When I was a kid, so many car chase movies. And they're just not really a thing anymore. We might have a movie with a car chase in, but there was lots of these movies where the focus was just on loads of car chases, and we just don't have that sort of thing. Things come and go in waves, and I think it's going to be almost impossible for them to catch lightning in a bottle for a second time when they do this soft reset and start to introduce new characters and build things up again. And I think that I don't think things will move on because they're going to start doing a bad job. I think things will move on because the next big thing will appear, the next big Star Wars. And I'm not saying Star Wars in terms of it's going to be a Star Wars.
I know what you mean.
But the next paradigm shifting movie will come along, and people will become obsessed with that. And I think eventually these things will start with Disney Plus coming along, with them pulling the Netflix characters off. I think it might have a very, very long tail as Disney Plus streaming shows, but I don't think we'll ever recapture the absolute frenzy that we've seen with Infinity War and Endgame.
No. Because remember, we used to have one film a year and then went to 2 films a year. And at one point, I think we had 3 Marvel films in one year. I think you're right. I don't think we'll ever reach the same heights. And I think the sign of that was when we'll see the declines in the box office, but also they'll decrease the number of films coming out per year.
Yeah.
So it'll go from 2 to maybe 1 film a year. Because when we had Lord of the Rings and you got one at Christmas, it was brilliant and it was one to look forward to. And it was just, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And the build-up and the tension. And almost in some ways, less is more. So I think we'll get to that point where you go, brilliant, it's the summer. We're getting the summer blockbuster Marvel movie. Great, I'm looking forward to it. And you might get the odd little ones here and there. and you'll get TV series. But I think it'll reach that point. So I agree with that prediction. So what's your other prediction?
So the other one, which is very boring compared to that one, and actually ties into what I was saying, is that I think the movies will fall out of grace slightly, and we'll start to see lots of stuff on Disney Plus, which is lower budget but potentially more interesting. Is we'll start to see probably very soon rebooted, much more family friendly versions of things like Daredevil and Iron Fist and the stuff that we were seeing on Netflix, but sort of sanitized for something that Disney will be happier to see on Disney Plus.
Oh, I hope not. I really hope not. I would like that some of them came back in some capacity, just the actors and those characters. But I really just want to see Charlie Cox come back as Daredevil and Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin.
It would be brilliant to see them again, but I just have a feeling that Disney are gonna, if Disney Plus are gonna have, The Lion King and Frozen on their streaming channel, they're so worried about their image. I don't think we're going to see the Deadpool movies on the same platform. I think we might see these characters directed, but I just have a feeling it will be in a very different form, because I just have a feeling that they're going to try and be more family friendly with their offering, because this is, it's clearly a logical place to have, their Marvel offerings as a streaming service rather than having it on Netflix. But the branding isn't Marvel; the branding is Disney Plus.
Yeah,
and there's, I think they're very protective of that particular brand, and I think that's going to restrict how adult they're willing to let things be on that streaming service.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be some shifting around because of the whole the great mouse that rules all. That owns everything. I'm not sure. So there was a thing in the news today that was saying that they're going to try and get Fox to focus on smaller films, not the big budget ones. That's going to stick to the kind of Disney side. So they're going to get a sort of differentiation in brand, the exception being Deadpool, because it works. And if it works, if it isn't broke, don't try and fix it. So he may be the exception to the rule. They're going to do a third Deadpool film just because it's been so big. I can't see them not doing it. But then I think Ryan Reynolds will stop, because they're trying to just keep milking that cow over and over. The jokes will get thin, and it's better to leave people wanting than just go, no, do Deadpool 17. No. Yeah,
I agree completely. It was something that was really new and refreshing, but it's a one joke film that's been really great for two movies, but they're limited to how much they can draw that out by itself.
Yeah, you can't go back to the well too many times on that. It's not like you're introducing new characters and spinning off like the other Marvel films all the time. So we'll see. Right, is that all of our predictions then?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot in there. We've covered a lot of ground, but if you've got any theories or ideas of where you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to go in the future, then get in touch with us. You can email us at grouchyoldgeeks@gmail.com. You can come onto the Facebook group, and don't forget to go onto the Geek Syndicate website to look at the other podcasts on there and leave us and the other podcasts an iTunes review, because that helps us get noticed by other people. In the meantime, it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.